If the Uber app says your trip never happened, but you remember every second of it, what does that mean? This happened to me 2 years ago, and I still don't have an explanation, but I know what I saw, and I know I wasn't alone in that car. Back in 2021, I had just moved to a new city, Denver, Colorado. I didn't know many people, and I was working a remote job that barely covered rent. So, like a lot of people during that time, I picked up some extra income driving for Uber at night. I liked the freedom. I'd go out after dinner, drive until about 2 or 3 a.m., then crash at home. It gave me time to think, listen to music, and sometimes overhear the wildest conversations. Most nights were uneventful. Bars, clubs, the occasional airport drop-off. But one night, I picked someone up I wish I hadn't. It was a Tuesday, around 1:30 a.m., and business had slowed down. I was parked at a gas station on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, debating whether to call it a night. Then I got a ping, a pickup just 5 minutes away. The name was Brian, and the pin was dropped near a 24-hour laundromat I'd never noticed before, the kind with flickering signs and empty soda machines out front. When I pulled up, I saw a man sitting on the curb under the harsh glow of the laundromat light. He was dressed in all white t-shirt, pale jeans, and a backwards white baseball cap. He stood up as I approached and walked over slowly. I rolled down the window and asked, "Brian?" He nodded once, didn't say anything, and got into the back seat, on the passenger side. I confirmed the destination. It was about 25 minutes away, on the far west side of town, near some hills and private residential roads. I hit start trip, and off we went. He didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. I glanced in the mirror a few times. He was looking out the window, but not at anything in particular, just staring, like people do when they're lost in thought. Except his expression never changed. He didn't blink much either, and I noticed he wasn't holding a phone or anything, just his hands folded in his lap. Eventually I asked, "You just finishing up laundry?" trying to break the silence. He turned his head towards me slowly and said, "No, I was waiting." I chuckled nervously. "Waiting for an Uber?" He didn't answer. I glanced again. He was now looking directly at the back of my head. I started to feel uncomfortable. It wasn't anything obvious. He wasn't acting aggressive or saying weird stuff, but there was something wrong with his stillness. Something eerie about how quietly he was breathing, like he was holding something in. A few minutes later, I noticed we were driving through an area I wasn't familiar with. Dark roads, no traffic lights, no other cars. The street names were just numbers, and the houses were spaced out like they were hiding in the trees. Then he spoke again. "Can you turn left up here?" I looked at the GPS. It didn't mention a turn. I said, "I think the app wants me to keep straight." He said, "Turn left. Calm, steady, like a command." I hesitated, then turned anyway. It was a narrow road, unpaved, winding between trees. There were no lights, no visible houses. My headlights barely cut through the branches hanging overhead. I was gripping the wheel tighter than I realized. Finally, I said, "Is this where you live?" He said nothing. I looked in the mirror. He was leaning slightly forward now, just enough that I could see the bottom half of his face. He was smiling. Not a big, creepy grin, just this small, unsettling curve at the edges of his mouth. Then he said, "You ever hear about this road?" I shook my head. No. He leaned in a bit closer and whispered, "They say it's where people go when they don't want to be found." I laughed nervously. "Okay, well, maybe let's head back to the main road." But he said, "Just a little further." Against my better judgment, I kept driving. After another minute or two, the trees opened up slightly, and there was a clearing. Dead grass, a broken fence, and an old, burned-down house. Just a blackened skeleton of wood and ash. I stopped the car. He said, "This is it." I didn't even ask why. I just stared at the ruin ahead and said, "You getting out here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the door slowly and stepped outside. He stood facing the house for a moment. Then he turned back and looked at me. "You shouldn't have kicked me up," he said quietly. Before I could reply, he shut the door and walked towards the house, into the charred remains, like he belonged there, like he knew it. I watched him disappear behind a wall of scorched beams. For a minute, I ended the trip and drove off, fast. I didn't stop until I was back in a populated area with street lights and people and normalcy. When I checked the app later, the ride was gone. No trip history, no name, no fare. Just like it never happened. I tried reporting it, but Uber told me there was no record of a passenger by that name. No payment attempt, no ride at that time. It was like I imagined the whole thing. But I didn't. I remember that white cap. I remember the way he whispered, and I remember the look in his eyes in the mirror, like he knew me. I still drive sometimes. Not as much. But every time I see a request from an unfamiliar name in a quiet part of town, I think about that night. And I wonder, what would have happened if I got out of the car too?